Welcome to Windows on the World. Now, following our shows on the NHS, we have a follow-up. Check out our shows in the archive, NHS Privatised and Ruined, amongst many others, where we've talked to experts in this field and also junior doctors who are extremely worried about what's going on. So, they plan to close your hospitals. Who will save St. Helier? Our next guests urge you to have your say about the plans to close your hospitals. In southwest London, under the guise of sustainability and transformation plans, this mechanism is being used to force through this so-called 5-year forward view. It's been implemented by Simon Stevens, and it will result in the NHS becoming a skid row service, leaving the general public with no alternative but to go private. If we don't stop this, we will have no National Health Service. In the studio, we have Colin Crilly and Claire Jackson-Pryor from the campaign. Welcome, Colin.
Hello, Mark. I just thought I'd just quickly start by saying that much of what you just said is this is a nationwide issue. Although we're here to talk about predominantly St Helier and Epsom and the local area, this is very much a nationwide trend, a nationwide attack, and these STP cuts, which is also known as a 5-year forward
Can
plan.
we go into what that means, first of all?
It's a bit of a mouthful. It's sustainability and transformation plans, which, to put simply, means that because the NHS has been now transformed from a caregiving organisation into a profit-making organisation, they've drawn up huge amount of debts, largely down to PFI. So because there's all these debts around in the country, and now the country has been divided up into 44 so-called footprints. It used to be a sort of a nationwide organisation, and every kind of area sort of worked together. They passed staff and resources back and forth. Now it's been carved up. So each area is now competing with one another in effect. They've created these huge amount of debts. So the government have actually said, you know, you need to come up with these plans to kind of get rid of those debts. One way or another, you have to give us your plans to the future. So that means stopping services, selling off of land, and hospitals are very much in the firing line. But I need to emphasise that this has been a step-by-step process and has been going on for around about 30 or so years. And whichever party has been in power, they have continued to implement these measures and these cuts and these steps towards the American health insurance system, and as you said, privatisation, and that's where we're heading.
We're nearly there now, and this is the shocking thing, that the public don't seem to have a handle on that yet. They still think there is an NHS. Do you want to come in?
Well, the thing is, because we still get things free at the point of use or point of delivery, we don't really notice what's going on in the background. So if we don't notice if our GP surgery is being bought up by one of these big companies. We don't know if GPs have had to group together and become bigger businesses, or we don't realise who's providing our physiotherapy if we're able to get any at all. Because it's all being done with the NHS banner in the background. In our area, we often get these patient transport ambulances going round. It's got the NHS banner, but it's also got G4S, because they're the ones who are actually running the service. So yeah, there's a lot of it going on, but we don't, unless you're looking for it, you wouldn't necessarily see it, because at the moment we don't have to pay for most of what we get.
Now, so how did this all come about, really? I mean, it's happening quickly now. It seems to have accelerated. So the position we're in now is that we have a all but privatised service in that the suppliers are private companies, and it's outsourcing, really, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, it's been going on slowly for a while. I mean, cleaning was outsourced in the 80s sometimes, which hasn't been too great because there's been higher incidences of MRSA and other things like that because it's not being cleaned as well.
That's really interesting you brought that up, because I don't think many people are aware of the connection there.
And catering as well.
And catering's been, because they used to have the kitchens in the hospital, but now you get the food brought in the little things, and you just tell them what you want and they get a dish out, and if they can't cater to your diet, then there's not some guy downstairs who can just sort something out for you quickly. It's a lot harder for them because they have to all go around and all the catering people, they've all got their own logo. I forget who it is at St Helier, but I was there the other day and I noticed, I forget who it is, but they seem nice enough people and all that. It's just that it's not as flexible and effective and cost effective as just having it all in-house.
And it's all being carved up, so there's less accountability and the blame. When something goes wrong, it's more difficult to pin it down as to who's to blame and who's accountable, and that goes right to the top. That goes right to the
Jeremy
government.
Hunt's not accountable anymore, is he? Because of this 2012
We'll come to
Health and Social Care Act. He's not.
Yeah, Jeremy Hunt is not in charge. It's Simon Stevens, but we'll come to that in a moment.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe we should go into that now. Who is Simon
Okay.
Stevens?
Go on, you two.
Simon Stevens, he used to work for the Tony Blair government. Then he went to the US to work for United Health, which is an American private health company. He was in charge of overseas development. Now that sounds a bit odd to have a position of overseas development in a private health company, but he held that position for a number of years. While he was in America, he actually lobbied against Obamacare and also for the inclusion of public services and particularly health services in Europe predominantly to be included in the trade deal negotiations like TTIP and so on. And then he's been now transferred back to Britain, and he's now in charge of NHS England, which are basically running the NHS on a day-to-day basis. And as Claire said, the Health and Social Care Act in 2012, the first paragraph removed the Secretary of State for Health his responsibility for our health. So in effect, that final barrier has been removed now, and it's literally been fragmented from the very, very top. So Jeremy Hunt can say all he wants, but he can only sort of pass on advice, and that's very rarely to Simon Stevens. Simon Stevens is the person who's in control of the NHS in England, and so he's the one who needs to be in the public eye rather than Jeremy Hunt. Jeremy Hunt is more of a fall guy, more of a symbolic character now. He's not really in charge of the NHS anymore.
No, he's the one who used to go around getting booed all the time, isn't he?
I think that position
Or have
has
a
it
tuba
for a
played
long
at
time.
him,
Yeah.
I've seen that on your videos. So, yeah, the point that Lucy Reynolds made was that people on the face of it appear to prefer the private health providers because on the surface it looks as though there's more customer care, but when it comes down to the actual service, it's rather different. Would you like to go into that now, Claire?
Well, yeah.
Mythbusting.
Mythbusting.
Yeah.
The thing is, it may seem all nice, and you might get more attention from somebody maybe, but it's costing us a lot of money. Because as an example, nothing to do with NHS and stuff, but just try and imagine if you want a conservatory built in your back garden and you don't know how to do it yourself, you've got to find someone to do it, you've got to discuss how much it's going to cost, and then you've got to pay them. And we've got these clinical commissioning groups all over the country who have to do that same process for all these private providers. They have to put their services out to tender, they have to get the bids in, they have to look through them, they have to decide who they're going to give the bid to, then they have to arrange the contracts and then arrange the payments, and this costs billions. And if they did it in-house, we could have our own better healthcare much cheaper.
Yeah.
As it is, we don't spend as much on healthcare per person in this country as a lot of other places, and including America, who have this private healthcare system apart from your Medicare and Medicaid, and they spend $8,000 each on people, and we spend
Per
about
person.
per person. And you aren't going to be able to see this chart, but I can give you the link to it later.
No, you can see it.
But America was spending $8,500 per person and not getting universal coverage. And this chart was going up to 2013, and here's UK there, $3,405 dollars per person. So we were getting universal coverage for much cheaper, and they want us to go further and further towards the American system, which doesn't cover anybody and cost everybody and costs a lot more.
See, but with private companies, because they're used to sort of pitching for contracts and selling their image, okay, they sell the image that we are efficient, that we're slick, we're shiny and new and everything's fine, and we work better. The NHS didn't need to do that because they're a publicly run service and they were extremely efficient anyway. But because these companies literally have to try and convince you that they are the ones that you need, you know, so it's the whole package. You know, they're practiced in selling their image to us. So people will be bombarded with these images of, you know, like new hospitals, new wards, wonderful service, and they're going to start buying into the fact that it's better, even though the NHS was the most efficient. But because the NHS has been underfunded in real terms for a long time now, and now it's being demonised by the media because it's starting to crack, it's starting to struggle, people are starting to become more susceptible to the image of, okay, well, we need an alternative, and that is part of the plan. That's a deliberate plan, and that happens every time they want to privatise public services throughout the world.
Yeah, I don't think people are that aware of it, because this has been a managed decline, really, hasn't it? And I've looked at it for about 10 years. Obviously, you were saying it's gone on a lot longer, but what we're seeing now is the end of it. And basically, we've been led into believing the should be private now. Now, how did we get there? Because
we're always told that it's so much more efficient. It's been a mantra that's been passed down the ages. But paper after paper, I've got a couple of them here. This is from Justine Sue of the World Health Organization. And this is another one by Cyru, and there's loads of these, and they've all analysed different aspects, and they can find really no difference. So if you've got no difference in the technical efficiency of the private and the public sector, why would you then add a load of unnecessary costs in choosing who's going to do it when you can just do it yourself? It's crazy.
Yeah, well, that's really good that you've pointed that out. Now, we'll just get to your campaign, which we're going to get to in the second half more, but just tell us a bit about what's happening with the St. Helier Hospital.
Well, the St. Helier Hospital has been under threat for a number of years. Up until a few years ago, there was quite a few sort of local groups that were sort of working separately, and we decided to try and get everyone, or we tried to get all the kind of groups to work together, and that's when COSH was created, which is Keep Our St. Helier Hospital, as you can see everywhere, including our T-shirts and the banner, and you know. So the hospital has been under threat for a while, and then a few years ago there was a big announcement saying that we're going to invest £219 to save the hospital.
Million.
Sorry, what did I say? £219?
Yeah.
That would go great. Yeah, £219 million, and there was a big banner on the front of the hospital, and everyone thought, oh great, you know, they're going to invest, everything's fine, we can relax. And then after a while, that was kind of taken down and quietly forgotten about, because they felt that there was no need to spend that money because it didn't feature in their plan. So there was obviously something in the pipeline that they weren't going to come out and admit. So that's when the sort of signs were really sort of there. And but then local MPs, the chief executives were sort of always saying, you know, it's safe, don't worry, don't worry. And then a year or two ago, the chief executive said it's safe for 5 years, do not worry, you know, everything's fine. Mind you, the clinical commissioning groups couldn't actually back up his claim. They said, well, that's his opinion, he has got no right to say it, but we're not exactly going to try and disagree. But so he said this, something that was unfounded, but he made this claim. And literally within a few weeks, there was this overheard discussion on a train where the chief executive, who's Daniel Oakley's, which we'll also come back to, he had this meeting with his board members, and they were drawing up plans, and they actually got a company called Deloitte. They paid them £300,000 to draw up plans to looking into shutting both St. Helier Hospital, Queen Mary's Children's Hospital, which is also on the same site, and Epsom Hospital. And that was overheard on the train, and of course then that was a sort of big local news story. So literally within a couple of weeks of him saying, you know, everything's fine, for the next 5 years we're fine, he's at the same time drawing up plans and paying a private company to draw up plans to close both hospitals. Possibly with the talk of a replacement hospital, but that has been denied by Jeremy Hunt, the Secretary of State for Health. So that came up just over a year or so ago. So, you know, the campaign has been going on for a few years now, 3 or 4 years. And we keep sort of saying the danger has not gone, the danger has not gone. The election came and went just over a year ago, and then all the MPs disappeared. We've continued, and now with these STPs plans coming up now, it's like a case of, well, we did tell you so, but we don't really want to be in that position, but we knew that the dangers were persisting, so that's why we're still here. So it's real, because when we've done stores before, people have sort of said, oh no, they said it's going to shut, you know, and it's been saved. Surely, you know, we've heard this before, and we're having to sort of say, because they're getting fatigue of all these messages. We're having to say, this is really it now. You know, this is the time. STP is the big one.
Right, well that's it. This is really it. The privatisation of the NHS. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Yeah. Welcome back to Windows on the World. We're talking about the destruction of the NHS and how it's being implemented locally. So we've got the St. Helier Hospital closure, possible, might happen, and it says here, massive NHS cuts and closures planned for South West London footprint. Slash, trash and privatise, the secret destruction of our NHS. That's from their leaflet. Claire, welcome back.
Well, I have with me the local plan. It's only a draft plan, they say. It was actually released, it wasn't supposed to be released, but the lead of the local council decided she would publish it. She wasn't the first in the country to do so. I think Camden was the first to do so. But my local MP, who's a Conservative, Paul Scully, he's insistent that this isn't about making cuts, that it's about delivering a better service. But in here, I'm really going to read it on page 5. It says, we are already overspending by around £140 million a year. That's just in South West London. If we do not take action to transform services now, South West London's NHS faces a gap of up to £828 million by 2020/21. So why, if it wasn't about money, would they make a point of saying that? And also, they say we haven't decided anything about your hospitals yet. You know, it's all, we're going to talk to the people. And what we found so far is they haven't really been talking very loudly or clearly, and haven't been publicising very well how to get involved.
That's a really good point, actually, with all of this stuff. And this is happening with the so-called regeneration of London, that the people aren't actually given a proper consultation. There's these fake consultations. Go on.
Well, what we found out that the South London councils have a scrutiny committee for health, and we went the other day, and they were because we were there during that meeting, we then found out that they are going to have what they call conversations with the local community, which so far they've got 4 meetings, and the one in the Sutton area, which is actually in Wallington, only has 75 places, and we hadn't seen it advertised anywhere. So I booked up while I was there. So they claim that nothing's set in stone. It's all, you know, we're listening. But it says here, you know, they're talking about the hospitals. It says here that they really need to reduce the amount of acute sites. So so it says Croydon, Epsom, they're all right. St George's in Tooting, well, it's got its problems, but we need that one. And then it's got a list about St Helier. It's got the 16th highest critical infrastructure backlog, and it needs this much, and it needs £200 million. So it's clearly the one on the list for going. And really, I wish they'd just say so.
Well, they have to have this appearance of public participation, and we cover this a lot. This is a big part of it, and also the fact that nobody really knew about it, but they can say, well, we had the meeting.
But also, they don't even seem to be talking to each other. While we were at the meeting, Dave, who's a member of Keep Our St Helier, gosh, yes. He asked them a question because it had come out in the local newspaper 2 days earlier that Epsom's mental health unit is going to be closed down, and all operations are going, you know, everything's going to go to Chertsey, which is it's about 15 miles away from us. And I had been told in a meeting by Daniel Elpleys, because you can go along to hospital meetings if you want to. He said no, it's all Epsom and St Helier is all in southwest London. So I thought, okay. So we were asking them about that. You know, what's going to happen? Where are people going to go? And they didn't know. The people who are in charge of sorting this plan out didn't know. And it turned out that physical health at Epsom is under southwest London, but mental health is in Surrey Heartlands. And they weren't talking to each other, so they don't know what the other one's doing. So how can you plan your services if you don't know what's going on around you in the other areas? It makes no sense to me. But
well, why is that happening, Colin? Do you know?
Why are they proceeding without all the
no,
facts?
why is it so disorganised? What?
It's because it's so fragmented.
Yeah.
I know the Epsom Hospital, whatever. It seems to be moving, as you say, moving over from South West London to Surrey and then back again, depending on the situation at the time. But the fact that mental health within the hospital has a kind of almost a separate life of its own, that it can be on one side of the border, whereas the rest of the hospital, all the services are included in South West London. It's bizarre, but it just shows how it's being fragmented, and you kind of get these oversights where things are missed out, and this is happening all the time. The NHS is being carved up, and people are starting to be missed out, left out. There's gaps forming. It's no longer a nationwide service anymore. It's a business, and it's becoming more and more fragmented. And these kind of confusions and problems are going to arise because they're competing with one another. The boroughs or the areas are competing with one another. So it's no longer, I was going to say, it's no longer fit for purpose. But that's because they've made it so. It's chaotic.
I mean, the only way that people can have been able to get involved is if they already know what a clinical commissioning group is, if they already know if their doctor has a patient participation group and have got involved, if they're able to attend clinical commissioning group meetings, and they're usually during the day when people are at work, so it's all a bit difficult for people to. It's been made that way. It's been done for convenience for us.
They haven't had a consultation, or they haven't. Or I don't think any of them have really started having one, but they've already implemented a lot of these measures. They've actually started to act them out already. So they've actually done it before they've even spoken to the public.
Yeah, we just found out yesterday that a mental health unit for women in Purley, which is part of Croydon area,
but still part of our South West London.
South West London. Is going to be closed. It's been under threat for a long time, but if Epsom's gone and this one for ladies in Purley's gone, is everybody going to go to Tutu? They can't do that, or are they just going to leave people out in the community? I mean, they keep saying that we're going to make community services better, but there's certain people who really need hospital treatment. There are some conditions you can't just be treated at home.
It's care in the community again, all over again. And you said about the closures, there was also Queen Mary's Hospital in Roehampton. The mental health services there were cut and passed to somewhere else. And there was a huge mental health hospital in Tooting that was sold, I think, in the sort of late 80s, early 90s. And now it's like a big kind of a housing estate, complex rather. So all those kind of services, it's all very well sort of saying, we need to make them more accessible. We need to get them more into the community. That's basically a euphemism for sort of saying we want to sort of close the central hospitals, and cut beds. Actually, speaking about beds, one of the reasons we've had the local recent crisis with bed numbers and the winter crisis, whatever they say, is because the bed numbers have literally in England rather, have been halved. Hospitals have been closed, wards have been shut. Over the last 20 or so, 25 years, literally half of the bed numbers have gone. That's why there's the backlog. That's why there's so much pressure on the hospitals at the moment. We are now probably one of the worst countries in Europe for bed numbers. I think we have about 2 per 1,000. I think Japan has 13, Germany has about 8. But if you remember that half the beds in the UK can actually be given to private customers, private patients. So so that 2 per 1,000 is now looking more like 1 per 1,000, and it's actually less beds per 1,000 people in the St Helier area, in Sutton, Carshalton, that surrounding area. And so if they're talking about shutting Epsom and St Helier with a possibility of a replacement hospital which will be smaller, that number will be even lower. So we're talking about going on par with India in terms of beds per 1,000. That's where we're heading. So you kind of get these crises come up from time to time, but this is a steady plan that's been going on for a long, long time, and the bed numbers is a real way of sort of saying that this is a deliberate thing, this is a long-term thing, and it's a crisis that's been manufactured by themselves, by the government and by the private companies that have been forcing these agendas and these acts through Parliament.
Exactly. I mean, it's not just the NHS, it's the whole of the infrastructure of the country, and especially housing and hospitals. Housing and hospitals.
Social care.
And social care. and this is all what they call a managed decline, really. That's what they did it with housing, they did it with the NHS. So we've gotten into a point where housing is unaffordable, and we're going to have a completely privatised service. So what can we do about it, Claire?
Well, in terms of what we can do about these things, the STPs, anybody who can get to a clinical commissioning group meeting or meetings of council scrutiny committees, that would be great. Writing to the MPs, writing to councillors, and writing to your local GP, coming to public events, coming to our public meeting. Have you got the leaflet?
We have. I'll just say the local councillors, MPs and GPs, they can actually still stop these STP plans. So it's very important to kind of get in contact with them. But we have a public meeting, if you're anywhere near South West London or South London, at the end of the Northern Line, there's a public meeting on the 16th of February in Morden. It's at the Baptist Church, and information is on our website. Like Claire said, get involved. I mean, you can join loads of groups. There's lots of established groups. The best groups are the local sort of hospital campaigns, the real kind of grassroots campaigns, rather than perhaps the nationwide ones. Join the local groups. I mean, we have the St. Helier group. There's also the Whittington Hospital in Archway. There's the Horton Hospital in Oxford. There's the Huddersfield Royal Infirmary, Dewsbury, Grantham. There's Ealing Hospital in West London. Join these groups because they do lots of good work, and it's also very inspiring when you're sort of there with local people, with active people. If you get involved with them, then the more active the people are that are around you, the more you're inspired to do things. So get involved with them. I say we've got a public meeting in February. There's also a big march in central London on the 4th of March. It starts at Tavistock Square. So there's lots of things sort of coming up. Do you want to mention sort of CETA just quickly? Yes,
because that's something we've covered on this show before.
Yeah, well, to sort of time this, as if it's not already bad news as it is, we've heard of sort of like the TTIP trade agreements, and I think Donald Trump has recently sort of said that he's against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is good. But these trade deals, and like I said with Simon Stevens, a lot of it involves, it's basically that the private sector forcing the agenda, and they want to privatise all public services. They don't think it should be run by the governments. They think that private interests should run them. And CETA, which is the Canadian version of TTIP, so it's Canada and Europe, that also has that in the trade agreement, and that could go through as early as February the 15th. So there's still ways to sort of challenge that and to kind of get your MEPs. If you contact your MEP, encourage them to vote against CETA in February. You can do that, I think, via the Global Justice website. If you go to the Global Justice Now website, should I say. If you go there, there's a link of how you can kind of contact your MEPs and get them to vote against it. But just one more thing, it hasn't actually been, as huge as CETA is, these massive trade agreements, it hasn't actually been discussed yet in the House of Commons. Liam Fox hasn't actually discussed it yet. So you can also contact your MEP to sort of say, why has it not been discussed in the House of Commons, and to encourage them to do it, because the fact that something as massive as this and with such implications to many aspects of all our lives has not even been discussed in the House of Commons, and it's literally on the cusp of being signed. It's quite a worrying thing.
It's a very worrying thing, and the people who are most worrying are those in charge, or are the ones who are allegedly in charge.
On the surface, yeah.
Yeah, so what we need to do is get organised locally. That's what you're saying, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Join groups, write to your MPs. If you can get to CCG meetings, and they often have a questions section at the end. So just say what you think.
Yeah, and another thing, I mean, our group is typical of lots of groups around the country, but Dave, as you mentioned earlier, he's put together, as you've seen, some great YouTube clips. We have our own YouTube channel, and there's lots of really informative clips on there that you can then share via social media, and that's a really good way to kind of get the message out, because sometimes listening to a speech or going to a public meeting is quite heavy going, but if you put out like a 5-10 minute video which says everything, it's much easier to digest, and it's much easier to sort of then share with other people. That's a really good way to spread the word.
Well, it is, and those public meetings, as we know, are held really using facilitators, and they're not really proper meetings.
We have to combat the narrative that we've been forced down our throats. Yeah.
Yes, we have to combat that and take back the power locally. So that's great. Well, thanks for coming in. Good luck with the campaign, and come back and let us know how it's getting on. So that's it from this section of Windows on the World. Keep our St. Helier Hospital and keep watching those, watching us, watching Winners on the World. See you soon.